Hey guys, Peter Franson here from christiangeekcentral.com and Spirit Blade Productions, ready to talk about Mass Effect Legendary Edition, which just released about a week or so ago on modern consoles. And there's a lot of buzz about this game, and well, there has been a lot of buzz about this game in its original state all the way up till now. EA was saying for a long time they were never going to do remasters. That wasn't their thing, but here, maybe with the pandemic in mind, they had to do something like this. But anyway, let me just briefly say where I'm coming from in terms of my experience with the original trilogy. I played the original trilogy pretty close to when it came out. I mean, maybe at least by the time I played 3, I'd kind of caught up with the release schedule of the series. The first game was a huge deal for me in my personal video gaming hobby. Prior to that, I had played strictly turn-based RPGs because I'm just not good at things that require quick thinking, quick reactions, hand-eye coordination, that kind of stuff. I tend to be a slower, deliberate thinker. I overthink things, and so the pressure of most action games is just too much for me. Of course, easy difficulty settings have allowed me to discover a bunch of video games I never would have discovered before, but the original Mass Effect started me on the road to even considering what action games and modern shooters and stuff I might be able to enjoy. So it was quite the novelty to me to be playing an RPG that was not turn-based, that was a science fiction game, a space-faring science fiction game, and a shooter. All those things were pretty novel in the video game space. Usually RPGs lean on fantasy, and so it was a pretty fresh and interesting experience when it came out, and I loved all of the freshness of it at the time when it came out. I do remember vaguely disliking a few things. There were some boring stretches on the Citadel, the main base that's kind of your hub for most of that first game, and there was some texture pop-in that was going on throughout the whole game. There was... as the series went on, it became more shooter-focused, and I really wanted it to stay more in its RPG roots. And then the dialogue choice that you are given these games, I want to put choice in quotation marks, because you're given just a little snippet of a couple words that represent in some way, somehow, what your character is going to say if you select that option. However, I just noticed way too many times that what came out of my character's mouth was very different from the impression I got from the little preview text. And BioWare did, I think, get a little better at that over the years and have those little snippets represent more predictably what your character's going to say. But I just remember it being a point of frustration with BioWare games in general, starting with Mass Effect. So returning to it now, playing it through backwards compatibility on the PlayStation 5, although it is a PlayStation 4 release and also an Xbox One release, I only had faint memories of the original, so I'm not about presenting a comparison to the two versions to you. I do have experience with the original, but I'm not. You can go somewhere else to get that kind of a direct comparison. I've played 5 hours of the first game in the trilogy. I decided to focus all of my attention there because the biggest changes were made to the first Mass Effect game, and that's where I would start. If I was going to replay this series, I wouldn't start with 2 or 3. Are you crazy? So even if I didn't like the first one, I would want to muscle through it before playing the second one, because so many of your choices carry over, which is surprising that novelty has not caught on with more game series since Mass Effect, and so many fans have really appreciated it for that. So anyway, let's see. Let's start with the control scheme. It was weird to come back to this game because games of this type that are kind of like shooter action RPGs have settled into different controller configurations than what I got in the Legendary Edition here. And probably the biggest thing was their use of the touchpad to bring up, to bring up something, your menus or something like that. I kept wanting to use the touchpad to bring up no. You use the touchpad to pull out your weapon, to get it out of its holster. Instead of what I wanted it to do, I wanted it to bring up my options. I wanted to bring up my map. I wanted it to bring up other things that are not about like pulling my gun out and getting ready to shoot people, And so I can't tell you how many times playing Legendary Edition Mass Effect 1, I pulled out my weapon or put my weapon away. I mean, it really, I think maybe toward the tail end of my 5 hours, I started adapting. But man, I really wish that they would have chosen something else for the control scheme. Let's see, what else did I want to cover here? It was interesting how simple the shooting was. I think in my memory, when I played this game, the shooting was much more intense because, again, I was playing a non-turn-based RPG for, if not the first time, then one of the first times. And so I was nervous going in. I was like, this is a shooter. I'm probably going to be terrible at this. And so I had my own tendencies and interests and leanings as a gamer that were making the shooting, I think, more intense in the my original playthrough than they were. Because this time around, I was like, wow, the AI is really pretty basic. These guys just kind of stand where they're going to stand. They move around a little bit, but it just doesn't compare to what you would come to expect, even from an RPG type shooter like, say, The Outer Worlds or Fallout or something. Well, I don't know, maybe it's comparable to those, but anyway, it was just kind of not what I expected. And there's also lots of dialogue quests in this first game, with combat that, relative to the dialogue quests, is rare. I was surprised at how much running back and forth I was doing, ultimately just to talk to people for the most part. There would maybe be little bits of combat here and there, but they come and go so quickly compared to all the dialogue that you're going through. And a lot of the dialogue, I think, is optional, but it's not clear to me when it's optional. Like, should I be investigating? And they give me the prompts to investigate. Well, if I don't investigate, am I going to know where to go next and stuff? And so many times I did feel like I should probably just explore all the dialogue options they're going to give me with this character. And so, in that vein, I will say that the world and the story are still the strongest part for me. The novelty of being in this space sci-fi story as the character that I create is still pretty cool. And it's in sci-fi, and space sci-fi in particular is not near as common as so many other RPG genres. And so there really still is a novelty to the world and their presentation of the world, the visual designs of the costumes and the different alien races and stuff. I mean, it is every bit as interesting to my eye as the Star Wars universe. I mean, it's not been around as long, so it doesn't have as much diversity and craziness as the Star Wars universe, but it's every bit as much an alien world that I would like to watch a TV series about. So, but unfortunately, the world and the story are still not enough to carry me through. I really wanted the combat to be a more interesting experience, not necessarily more of a action shooter experience. That is where they take the series in 2 and 3. I just wanted, if anything, double down into the real time with pause thing, make it maybe a tactical experience or something. So it's not that I want it to be more of a shooter. I just wanted it to be a little bit more interesting, a little bit more interesting in the AI department or in the mechanics of combat or something. Maybe, if I would have tried a biotics character, I still shied away from that this playthrough, so I have to say that I was just playing a straight up soldier, and so there's a good chance that it would be more interesting if I went with biotics. Let's see here. The voice acting I thought was strong. Coming back to that, it still holds up very well, with very few exceptions. And I would expect nothing less from BioWare. But the face animations do not match. I mean, they have not aged well. In fact, all the complaints that people had about Andromeda and how the facial animations for that game were, especially at launch, that game, maybe even at launch, had better facial animations than what I saw in Legendary Edition here. So that doesn't seem to have been upgraded at all. So there's a significant disconnect, and you just kind of notice how games have come along since then. But one thing I will say is that the music, along with the voice acting, really strong. It has its own distinct style and flavor that was kind of, at the time, novel for pulling from the 80s. Now, of course, in the last 5 to 10 years, we've been getting a deluge of 80s nostalgia in music and aesthetics and stuff like that. So it's not, the synth score isn't near as interesting and rare. Well, no, I don't want to say interesting. It is interesting, and it does set the mood for me really, really well. But it's not as novel. I keep reusing that word, sorry. Let's see here. I got a comment on the map and the quest navigation. I really feel like the markers that they provide to get you from to where you need to go for your quest objective have come a long way since this game. They will put, like on the Citadel, which is a multi-story complex, they'll put your quest marker somewhere that indicates where it is on the floor. I don't know, like 3 floors up or something. It doesn't give it to me in stages. Like, can you just tell me where should I go? Just make the path clear, okay? Take me to the elevator and then move the marker once I'm on the elevator to the next place I need to go, and just take me in stages to where my quest objective is. Because looking at the map and then trying to navigate the Citadel, I just felt lost a lot of the time. And so there was one quest that I actually finished in a way that I didn't intend to, which, in one way that's cool because, hey, you can finish quests multiple ways, but I mean, that's in a lot of games these days. But because I lost my way, I was like, is this how I go to where I'm going? Oh, okay, I'm attacking people, I'm shooting people. I guess maybe I'm doing the bad guy thing here. So, and that was just because I lost my way, and I was like, well, I'm probably going to make some kind of progress going in this direction. So yeah, I think there are just some things about this game that have not aged well. I think if I either had a ton more nostalgia for my original experience with the trilogy, or no experience at all with the original trilogy, that either of those two probably would have aided my enjoyment of this game. But as it stands now, I just can't see myself playing this and playing all through the whole trilogy again, which is a bit surprising. I mean, I'll keep my saves, but it's let me mention that it's an 83 gigabyte installation to put the whole trilogy on there. So even if I did own this game, I wouldn't keep it installed. I would keep the first game installed if that was an option. But no, you got to install the entire trilogy all at once, as near as I can tell. And that seems like a missed opportunity to just save up some space on hard drives that doesn't need to be clogged up with 3 whole games when you are going to be playing them one at a time anyway. And let's see here. For $60, you get all 3 of these games up-resed with new textures, which for the most part, I mean, really sell the game well and bring it up to PS4 standards, I think. Every once in a while I ran into a texture that's like, oh, this one didn't get upgraded, or it looks a little blurry or something. Oh well, but for the most part, like I said, the world is a big selling point, and a big part of how they sell the world is in how they redid the textures and graphics and stuff. So really pleased with how that turned out. The screenshot comparisons I saw online didn't do justice to just how nice it looks in this remaster. So anyway, you get all 3 games. You get them up-resed, you get them improved, especially the first one. You do get some options in the game. There's a difficulty option in addition to a level scaling option, which I don't think was in the original game, that allows you to kind of modify your experience even further in the first game. And all of that for $50 less than if you were to, as cheaply as possible, buy all the original trilogy on, like, say, Xbox 360, where you can get each one for $2 plus shipping. But then on top of that is all the DLC that didn't come with it, which really starts to add up. Now, that's if you want to get all the DLC. Some of it, like, a few costumes and weapon sets and stuff here and there, you might not want. But still, $50. I would say if you shave off kind of like the bonus weapons, the bonus armor, or whatever, and you just buy like the main story DLC type stuff, that's still going to end up being like $40 more to get the old school versions. And so I think as far as value is concerned, if you have a PS4 or an Xbox One, it seems like a no-brainer to go with this. Especially if you wait a little while and don't buy it brand new. Then you could really, in theory, get kind of a smoking deal, depending on, whether or not you have the same problems with the dialogue-heavy quests and other issues, that I mentioned. As far as themes, I always like to ask, is there anything of moral, philosophical, or spiritual significance going on in the themes of this thing that might trigger some worthwhile thought or conversation? Yeah, I do think so. There's... as is the case with a lot of science fiction, there is a naturalistic leaning in the worldview. In other words, an atheistic view where there is no God, there are no there are no like non-physical realities. So humans are only their physical components. There is no non-physical like soul or non-physical spirit. All of those things are ultimately limited to physical reality. And I think that we see that a bit in one interaction with an evangelist, an alien evangelist who wants to evangelize in the open spaces on the Citadel, and he needs to get a permit for that, but he doesn't want to. He doesn't think that you should have to get a permit just to share your view on the subject of God, and so it's really it's a easily missable optional interaction and quest that you can pick up, but it's still one of the most noteworthy ones from early in the first game. And I did appreciate the nuance that you are given in this conversation to either, scoff at his beliefs and just kind of reject him, or say, hey, no, I think what you're doing is something that should be allowed and that we should be open-minded to, talking about these things. Where it has the naturalistic leanings is that this alien worships ultimately another alien species, another alien being, and so that kind of leans in the direction of, oh, well, all of our ideas of God probably just are aliens. We'll find out eventually, and so which steers away from anything that's non-physical towards something that is completely natural. Let's see, what else? Oh yeah, when one character dies, I won't say who, but when one character dies, their last words are, "There's no light. They always said there would be a light," and then they die. And so I've heard that line in at least one other movie as well. And so again, it's putting up the idea that there's nothing after this life. There's nothing after this life. It's just emptiness, just blackness. We die, and then there's nothing after that. And then finally, and this is just something I know from having played the whole trilogy before, you are, over the course of this trilogy, encouraged by the way the story is written to care about completely manufactured characters, like completely AI robot characters. So your toasters and your cell phones and stuff like that could one day be just as much persons as you and I, and have just as much value that we ought to care about as you and I, if they are allowed to evolve and all that kind of stuff. And so you're even treated like, when you get some options to treat AI characters as though they are merely machines and they are not persons that have worth, then you are kind of a bad guy. That's kind of the bad guy option. You'll have party members that really don't like you for that, and it's clear that you're choosing what the developers think of as the nasty choice, whereas I just when faced with that decision, I'm sorry, it's a cell phone. It's a cell phone, or it's a toaster, or whatever, And so now maybe they're intending not really to make a commentary on AI or naturalism or whatever, but maybe it's meant to be a parallel toward different types of racism and stuff like that. And so I can appreciate that, but even so, I would rather they give commentary on racism, if that's what they want to do, by another actual life form, instead of something that was made by somebody else and kind of requires you to suspend disbelief to the point of accepting naturalism in the context of the game world, So anyway, yeah, but those kinds of things are not like constantly all over the story and the script. They do become a much bigger centerpiece of the story in parts 2 and 3. Then they're really kind of unavoidable, and are core to some of the major decisions at the end of the third game. But in the early parts of the game, not as much. All right, so at the end of the day, how am I feeling about this one? I'm going to say something kind of weird. I already own Andromeda. I picked it up for like $5, I don't know, a couple years ago, a year or two ago. And after playing this, I'd kind of rather go back and pick that up again and see if I want to see that one through. I lost interest in that one. I didn't hate it, but I just kind of lost interest in it. But after this, I'm like, the next time I want like a modern Star Trek, action-y, spacefaring, sci-fi kind of video game experience, I think Andromeda is where I'm going to want to go to. ironically not this very, very celebrated trilogy, Andromeda has more engaging gameplay for me and more frequent combat and fewer of the left field dialogue choices that were still very much present and that really seemed to take me in directions I did not intend to go at all. So it's like, BioWare did improve over time, and I see that as much as I gave them a hard time in all the games, after that, coming back to this one, I realized they really have improved these dialogue choices. And so I would say maybe I'll sometime get this game cheap, used as a sort of a lead up to playing the next Mass Effect game, if we ever hear about that actually happening. Well, I mean, no, there has been confirmed, but it depends on when it gets announced that it's going to be released. If I'm not still playing Andromeda at that time or haven't finished Andromeda yet at that time, maybe I'll consider a cheap copy of this collection as something to kind of get me ready, quote unquote, for the next Mass Effect game. But ultimately, I think this game is better in my memory and better as something I appreciate for the doors it opened for other games that I enjoyed after it and because of it. But I mean, right now, as an alternative, Andromeda, I would also play Greedfall. I got that recently through PlayStation Plus. Also a game that I kind of felt I complained had too many dialogue quests where you're running back and forth just to talk to people with very little combat in between. I still haven't finished that game, and when I'm in the mood for that kind of really dialogue-heavy story experience, then, the first Mass Effect or Greedfall would be something that I would maybe go to. I'm just not often in the mood for something that's that focused on story and dialogue. The Outer Worlds as a sci-fi spacefaring adventure has much more interactivity in terms of the world and your place in it, your ability to interact with it and interact with people and have an effect on the world. And so, yeah, there's definitely just a number of other options. So for now, Mass Effect Legendary Edition is not something I'm interested in playing any further. But I would love to hear what your thoughts are if you've given it a try or not. You can leave those in the comments below. And then I hope you'll join us soon over at christiangeekcentral.com as we continue to geek out and seek the truth.